Miss Diane Sidden. Miss Diane Sidden is an audience platform project manager for Cisco, where her role to drive cutting-edge technology changes in the organization. She has been in online and traditional marketing for over 25 years and has worked in several agencies as well as being client-side. Diane is a conference speaker at Hero Conference, Oracle Modern Marketing Experience, Search Insider Summit, and Digital Summit, among others. She has written for several search engines watch and has been published in the journal Digital and Social Media Marketing.
Marketing for a long time when actually Google wasn't even a search engine, and actually got started in paid search and SEO back when it was very new. Spent a lot of my digital career in paid search, which is where I ended up going into Cisco after working at a lot of different ad agencies in New York, and actually started my own agency for a little while. Being client side is definitely is challenging just as much as it is being with an agency. And nothing, I think, was more challenging when Cisco tried to move from going from our standard media buying banners to moving to a more of a programmatic media platform. Because Cisco's a very large company. Globally, we have over 70,000 people. And especially when you're making a new change, especially around technology, a lot of times it really makes with a lot of resistance. So when we started migrating to our new digital transformation model, we had a lot of, people pushing back, but we knew that it was the way that we had to be competitive and stay ahead of our competitors. So what this presentation is going to talk about, it's going to talk a little bit about our journey through how we got to programmatic. We'll talk about some case studies, and we're going to go through, let me bring up the agenda a little bit, to talk about, how you identify your audience that you target. With Cisco, we have a lot of different audiences that we try to reach, and we'll go into a little bit more about how we do that. But we'll also talk about programmatic and artificial intelligence. Again, that's kind of the big buzzwords we hear out there today. We'll talk about how they work together and how you can make them work for programmatic media. And then we'll talk about user intent and content. This is something that we're really very focused on at Cisco right now, is not just putting things out there because we think the customer wants them, but based on what their intent is, what their behavior signals of what they're doing online, to make sure we give them the most relevant experience that we can. And then we'll go and talk about some of the 5 do's and don'ts of programmatic. So if you haven't guessed, this presentation has got a little bit of a rock star theme. So at the end of the day, we want you to be rock stars in programmatic and be able to take these learnings that you'll learn today and being able to apply them, back when you go back to the office. So let's first talk about how you identify your audience. It's not just about reaching an audience. It's about understanding the audience that engages with you and your brand. And this means you have to think of it in multiple facets, like a persona. Again, who is that audience? We tend to, at Cisco, bucket our audiences into different, what we call personas. So we look at like someone who buys networking equipment, someone who buys security, someone who might buy cloud technology, because while they're very different products, and they sometimes have different types of people that are actually in the buying decisions for that. So we want to make sure our messaging, when we're trying to reach this audience, is focused on their needs and reaching them in the moments that matter, those moments of where they're doing their research. They might be in the middle of making a buying decision between 2 different companies. It's also important to have that right messaging content, right message, right time, right place, right channel. So if you want to be a rock star, you have to understand your audience. You have to know that they are your fans, they're dedicated to you, and you have to cater to their needs and their wants, because it's very important that when they come and spend the money at a show, that you provide them with what they need. So to know your audience, we know that a lot of times when people go to rock concerts, they like to consume beer. Very important to make sure that if they consume beer, that you have the right facilities for them to take care of that. Otherwise, you have a bad user experience where people have to wait in long lines, not very happy, a bad experience all the way around. So in putting this into the sense of what digital looks like, digital allows us to know who that audience is, know what their likes are, their preferences, being able to segment this audiences into fans or whoever that persona might happen to be, and then target and optimize this audience based on their needs. At Cisco, we have what we call a racetrack for our customer journey. And every time we have a campaign or something comes to us and say, okay, we need to market to this particular group, the first thing we have to think about is who is that audience we're trying to target. We have to identify who they are. So we utilize different tools like audience discovery, and we look at different segmentation to be able to determine who that audience is. And this is a foundation because once we determine that audience, we can identify the channels that we're going to market to them, create that positive customer journey that brings them back, develop content that's going to be appealing to them, and then again, reset and repeat this experience over and over again. So at Cisco, we have the evolution of how we've gone through our different periods of time where how we targeted our audience. So back in the day, it was all about email. You know, we basically bought email lists, you know, targeted those audiences that we know, and, you know, that was great. We started getting a little bit smarter around 2014 and 15, where we started utilizing Google to do retargeting with Google Analytics. We, you know, encompassed using Target. So we were really starting to do a lot of our basic cookie segmentation at this point. Again, the goal here, instead of known, we were targeting more on an anonymous basis. We started getting a little bit more advanced around 2016, where we started incorporating our persona methodology. And we also started investing in our tech stack a little more heavily. So this is where we started looking at technologies such as BlueKai, which is a data management platform to allow us to target our audiences, and also using Eloqua, which allowed us to do marketing automation through email. And so again, integrating our paid media channels. So now we're going more into the predictive realm, where we're looking at intent data, behavior data, focusing on, and this is where we started migrating a lot of our media over to programmatic and using DV360 or double-click bid manager as it's known today. So I didn't say that there's a lot of different components to it. We utilize customer research, you know, what our audiences care about, market insights, looking at intent, you know, real-time intent inferred from what they're doing on Cisco.com, capturing their behavior where they go on site to know that, hey, they have an interest in security. And then that way we can target them when they leave Cisco.com with messaging to bring them back. Again, looking at demographic and firmographic data, really it's all of these different elements that build who this person is, or the persona that we talked about earlier. But just like, you know, guitar collection, data sources can be very varied. They can all look the same. They might be similar, but there's just a plethora of different types to look at. And it's like, well, which ones do I use to determine, you know, this audience that I'm trying to target? So with Cisco, we use what's called first and third party data. And this, a lot of it is available through BlueKai, which is our data management platform. Our first party data is our own data. This is Cisco.com data. And it's our most relevant data because it's the data that we own, and we've been able to develop it into looking at different contact levels, online behaviors, and different intent signals. We also utilize third-party data, which can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes because it's a massive amount of data, and sometimes, you know, it can be so many different data sources. Well, which ones do you pick from? So we've learned over time to start simple, but also, you know, look at data that's consistent with your objectives. So if you're trying to target people in security, for example, you would look at data sources that, you know, would provide information on, you know, customers that might have had past purchases of different security software. And then use data that you trust. We've learned over time which data providers we felt most comfortable with that was best for Cisco needs. And again, different companies utilize Blue Kai's data marketplace in different ways. So people that are more from a retail background are going to use different providers than we would normally because we're more of a B2B company. And this audience-led targeting has really driven success for us. We have gotten a lot of what we call click-to-reveal conversion rates in paid media, which means when someone reveals to us, it's basically they've given us an email, aka we like to call it, you've given us our invitation to date you because now we can send you emails and bring you back and back over again. But it has been a very effective way for us to target, because being able to target these audiences with very specific messaging, again, has more of an opportunity to be successful. It's also much less expensive. We've saved a lot of costs there as well. And for email, it's definitely driven up our click-through rates very, very exponentially versus just sending out emails to the masses. So taking all the audience insights that we get from Blue Kai and from our other sources, what we try to oftentimes do is find that aha moment in the data. So sometimes you have to go through spreadsheets of data, looking at the network buyer audience, for example, finding like, what's really interesting about this audience? What is something that's kind of surprising? And maybe we can use that and target this audience in a unique way. So the first thing you do is next you need to look at defining your goal, is looking at what is the purpose, what kind of media you're trying to target this audience, and how you're going to measure that. And then digging into the data, looking at topics within that audience that show a high probability that or something that's very interesting about this audience, determine what those priority topics are, and then determine what your media strategy is based on these topics. How do you want to target this audience based on their interests? So we had a couple of use cases where we took these insights and developed marketing campaigns for them. The first one's called the Myers Network Challenge, where we had an audience that we wanted to create and educate around a particular software product called DNA. So we decided to do some research on this particular audience and realized they were heavily into gaming. They were big gamers. It showed that across a lot of different platforms, a lot of different data sources. So we thought, let's create a gaming experience for this group. And it's an online competitive gaming experience of how you would colonize Mars. And the result was it drove a lot of new visitors to Cisco.com that we normally wouldn't have. And a lot of people have registered for the challenge, and it continues to grow. And it was something we had never done before. We actually had never developed any kind of a game for people to play, especially because a B2B company like Cisco doesn't do that. But thinking outside the box and taking that data, it was a very successful campaign for us. So let's take something a little bit simpler. So this is a use case where we were looking at our security team came to us and said, hey, we want to target existing accounts that haven't purchased this next gen product. We know that they haven't, based on the data we've got, but how do we get them to do this? So looking at the audience for security, they showed a very high affinity for Halloween. They liked Halloween parties. They were just into it, and almost like it was a holiday. So we thought, security, Halloween, hey, let's develop some very interesting targeted creative that has a bit of a Halloween flavor to it. So we pulled the insights on our discovery report for this to kind of dig into this audience, built this creative, and the goal was to re-engage existing customers to have awareness of this new product. The click-through rate on these banner ads was over 40%, which anybody who creates banner ads knows that's unheard of. But we drove a lot of increased sales to the product. Even though we had a strong click-through rate on the ad, we were able to definitely drive more people to buy this new generation product. So from an audience perspective, let's talk about some of the key takeaways. As a guitar, you want to choose your sound, but you need to understand your audience. Know where your guitar is, and determine who your relevant data sources are. And then always plug in your jack, which means you need to develop a media strategy around them. So let's go moving into talk about programmatic and artificial intelligence and how they work together. What is programmatic? That's a big buzzword out there. Everybody's like, well, what is it really? It's really, all it is automated media buying software. So back in the day, people had to actually manually go out there and buy media. Now it's all automated and utilizes machine learning technology to be able to optimize when your ads are going to show based on the goals that you decide to set. But it's really important to make sure that with programmatic, that you must make sure that you have to have the right data sources in place. Otherwise, is it a dog or is it a muffin? It's kind of hard to tell. And then how does it really work? So utilizing machine learning, it finds and reaches almost everybody of the internet audiences on the websites that will allow advertising. And then it makes those ad buying decisions based on goals. Programmatic's always based on the goals that you define. And then over time, it's going to predict which audiences are going to respond best to the messaging and serve them the right messaging based on that historical information that the machines have been able to learn. But what is it not? It's not set it and forget it technology. It's something you have to constantly monitor and measure. It's not based on third-party data because, again, programmatic is people. You want to target that people that are first party, people that are coming to your site, not just massive amounts of people. It doesn't drive, it's not a driver in conversion of leads. It's really more an ability to have awareness and to drive people to your site, but it's not necessarily going to be the final conversion point. And it's not something that provides instant results. It takes time for the algorithms to learn and the data to be populated out there. So it's not something that you can start and it's going to give you results right away. So again, it's something that takes time to do that. And one of the things I'd like to mention here with programmatic is while Cisco does have an agency that handles a lot of that, we also have inside expertise as well because we want to make sure that we as a company own our strategy for programmatic, but our agency partners work very closely with us to help, put everything into market. It's a great partnership, and it's nice because we have knowledge on both sides of, that experience. So it's not that, they're telling us what to do or we're telling them what to do. It's definitely a partnership. Programmatic's hard because every campaign, every product, every message is different. Some of these campaigns that you set up programmatic can be very, very complicated because if person goes here, serve banner here, and then if they don't, they go here. They develop very complicated, methodologies and things like that with that because you want to make sure that, you're providing your user with the message that they're looking for. And as programmatic learns over time, that message can change based on that person's interest. So predictive and algorithmic-based audiences is what we are migrated to with Cisco. So when we first started going with programmatic, we kind of looked at it in kind of a layered floodlight. So we took a lot of our, what we call our non-scored audiences. And so instead of, we put those actually into the DoubleClick Bid Manager platform instead of utilizing them in BlueKai. It was a lot less expensive. And we were able to do things much more real time that way. We focused with our first party data mostly in our data management platform. So we kind of split things out a little bit, which actually worked very well and allowed us the ability to be a lot more targeted. We got very streamlined in our reporting where we could actually report on an audience by audience level basis, where we could just see like which audiences were performing well and which ones weren't, and then if we needed to make a judgment. We also incorporate a lot of floodlight tags. This way, when someone comes to a page, we could track all the specific actions, whether they clicked on a banner, whether they filled out a form, whether they, whatever actions we decided to target on that page. And then that way we're able to capture that data as well and feed that into the algorithmic engines as well. So it's very important for us to kind of break out our strategy into two areas. We always want to be looking for new people, but we also want to retarget the ones we currently have. So Prospecting, again, we look at this as always trying to find new people. Who else can we target out there? So we utilize several different technologies for that. We utilize lookalike. So again, a lookalike is taking someone that you know and finding other people out there that look like that audience. We use Google Custom Affinities, which is utilizing Google's first-party SEO data. We also use contextual inventory, where we find keywords that match topics or themes in web content. And then Google Custom Intent, which is really something fairly new that we've been focusing on, where we use Google's first-party SEM data to profile search behavior across Google. So always looking for new people that we can find, but at the same time, we also want to retain the people we have and retarget them. So here we use several different strategies where we'll retarget people based on, what kind of engagement that they have. Usually we'll look at kind of like a minimum of the funnel there. We also do product-based retargeting. So if we might have someone who's interested in security, but they also might show an interest in cloud, we do cross-sell. So again, they may could potentially be getting a message based on the other technology that they show an interest in, based on their behavior. And then, of course, email retargeting, which is always very effective. And then also looking at retargeting wipe our personas and verticals. So again, when we're trying to target, again, we try to focus on the list of personas that we want to target. So I know this is a little bit of a busy slide, but to really make programmatic work, it's using the machine learning to develop those, KPIs that we have. So this is kind of a little chart that shows where we have a lot of our floodlight tags on the key pages on our sites, right, to capture those different moments of what they might be doing. Then we identify those audiences, how they're responding, and then the machines will actively make those real-time decisions based on that performance. We always want to suppress people we don't wish to target, and then this allows us to get the insights about that audience and allows us to determine what kind of creative is best for this person, right? If they're showing interests in multiple areas, our creative should show that, and then also driving them to the proper landing page on Cisco.com. So with programmatic, here's some of the key takeaways. When you write your lyrics, it's always important. Always define your goal. Everything programmatic, the first thing you need to determine, even before your audience, is what is the goal you're trying to accomplish. You need to determine the melody. Determine what your input data is going to be. Add your harmony. Determine what tactics you're going to use. Are you going to be using floodlights? Are you going to be doing, any kind of, affinity-based retargeting? And then you want to get the band together because you need to optimize to those goals. So let's talk about user intent and content. The audience you might be planning for in media may not be the audience that responds to your advertising. I think that's one of the things that we've had to really kind of step back and take a look at, because we always want to think pushing something out to our customers, that's what they want. But a lot of times that's not what they want. And we have to listen to what they're interested in. It's really important to the response of their behavior signals that really matters. So it's important on your website to have those behavior signals built in, what they, like an intent, and define behaviors and looking at as kind of like mini goals instead of like major goals. And then don't generalize behavior to an entire audience, because within that audience, there's going to be different behaviors that are going to come up. And then, you have to make sure that, you derive the content based on what that is. So you always have to plan for insights. Time of day, intent, device, what, device is, the topic of interest. They build who that picture of that user is. And the more we focus on what their intent is, this gives them ability to drive the content that they care about. And this is how machine learning can tell what the user is doing on the site and it'll bid accordingly, but again, making sure that we have that right content for them. It's just an ad, or is it really? Most people, a majority of people, do not click on a banner ad, but it is part of the decision-making process. It's part of the influence of the buying journey, because you can maybe not click on it, but you're going to see it. But no one really goes to our website to read advertising. Now, I do, because that's what I do, but most people don't. But again, it's to catch people in a place where they might be interested in seeing an ad. And one of the examples I have here kind of shows an ad on the left, which is kind of not really exciting. It's got a lot of content. It's not going to get your attention. But the one on the right, short and sweet and has a really strong call to action. That's where people have more of a tendency, either if they click on the ad or it's going to resonate in their head. It's like, oh, that's Cisco's ad. I'm going to remember that. So let's talk about creative practices. It's always important to concise and compelling, like that banner we just showed before. It needs to be short, get people's attention, but it needs to provoke emotion and feeling. And it needs to promote some kind of action, whether they click on it or not, but even if they don't, but at least to put in mind who you are as they're going through. So what's interesting here is the algorithms with programmatic will always determine what is working and what is not. Kind of another example of an ad on the left where, a lot of budget, got the goals, but it really wasn't an ad that was really compelling. The two ads on the right, again, more of a visual graphic, call to actions to get people's attention and kind of having a tagline that really represents, speaking to someone more on that personal, getting that empathy from them. So how do we take machine learning to the next level? So this is where we're working a lot right now around the notion of personalization. So for example, if someone's on Twitter and they're on Google and they see a banner and they come to Cisco.com, this information on the left tells what their interest level is, what they're searching, what the banner is. And what if we can take all of that information and customize their landing page experience to be based on their behavior? So personalization is a big trend that's really coming out there a lot. And a lot of B2B marketers are stepping up their game around personalization. A lot of customers want and expect it because it's, but doing it right is very, very complicated. And that's one of the things that we've really been focusing a lot on, because by 2020, 85% of customer interactions are going to be managed without a human, which means the machine learning and everything is going to determine what that experience is going to be like when, they interact. But it's important that you do it right, because you can see with some of the quotes at the bottom, and unfortunately the company names didn't show through with the presentation, a lot of people aren't getting it right. And a lot of people are challenged with this because it is difficult. It's a struggle to get there. It is something that is really a big focus with us right now. We're actually in the process of doing some technology changes to really make sure that our customers do have that personalized experience. And maybe if I come back next year, I can tell you a little bit more about how that's going to look in our world. So here's an example of how this would work. So if you were to come to a website, you can actually see content offers that change, recommended content for you, personalized chat connect. So again, it's a landing page that's directly related to you and your interests. So what are some of the benefits of utilizing personalization? When you don't have personalization, you assume that everybody coming to that page has the same needs, and you know that they don't. Again, it's kind of rigid. Everything's very linear. It's not an experience that it's going to be the same experience that I'm going to have versus the person sitting next to me is going to have. When it's personalized, it's going to be, it's going to have offers that are going to be matched to that person's interest, what they've done online and how that maps to it. And unfortunately, I guess the graphics didn't quite come through on this a little bit. But it lets them self-direct their own journey. So when they come to the site, they're able to see these different things. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm interested in this. And, they'll be able to create their own experience, which is, at the end of the day, what you want them to do. So let's talk about some of the content key takeaways. There we go. Pick your instrument, look at your intent signal, see what your customer's intentions are, and that's going to help develop content that speaks to them. Practice with your band. Create concise, relevant content. It's not about how much content you create, it's creating the right content that is speaking to that customer in that moment of buying or making a decision or whatever research they might be doing. Add a stinger. Develop a targeted landing page. You can create the best content in the world and have the best banners, but if the landing page is not going to be relevant to what they're trying to find, and maybe if it's not personalized, it's not going to be a good option. And then play the song. Give the algorithms time to optimize. So very, very important to make sure as you're, creating a personalized experience, making sure that you let things run out there. Don't be changing things around. Let the machine learning do what it's supposed to do. So as we're getting towards the end here, we're going to talk about 5 of the programmatic do's and the don'ts that you should do in your campaign. You want to be a rock star guy. It's important to always define your goal. When I started getting into programmatic, I had a great mentor, and that was basically the one thing that she really, instigated into my head when we started looking at programmatic, because I came from a paid search background, and programmatic was very different to me. I mean, it's like, what? Machine learning? I don't, and then it was just really made a lot of sense, because making sure that you know what the goal is up front, everything else is going to be built around that. Use multiple tactics in your strategy. So, it's not just necessarily having paid search and social and all of that, which, obviously is important to do. But within programmatic, there's many different ways that you can target. You can target, for example, using account-based marketing. If you have like an ABM list that you want to target, you can target using floodlight tags. Target people on different areas of the page where they might happen to go, and then retarget them based on the fact that they clicked on a particular section of the page. Let the algorithms do their work. I know I've said this a couple of times, but it's very important to not just try to change and tweak things out there, because the machine learning, and however you use this, whether it's programmatic or whatever area you're in, it has to take time to learn. And once it learns, it's going to self-direct how everything's going to be, how banners should be displayed, and again, giving people that user experience that they're looking for. Define clear reporting and measurement guidelines. I think that was one of the biggest challenges that we had, because okay, now we're doing programmatic, but how do we measure it? And how do we know we're doing it right? So we developed really detailed dashboards where we could actually go and look to see how an audience was performing, and also having our agency provide weekly readouts to us to saying, okay, here's what's working, here's not, here's what we need to change. And then create care about content. Content, I think, is one of the things that is really the foundation of anything, because it's all about the messaging, whether it's social, programmatic, search. It has to be that right message, right time, right medium to get that person's attention in that right moment. So here's some of the don'ts. You don't want to be like this guy who jumps off the stage and nobody decides to catch him, which is not a good thing. To set it and forget it. With programmatic, it requires constant viewing, optimization, checking, because things can change. You don't want to just leave things out there, because you just don't know when something can happen in the industry and how that's going to affect people's, how they're responding and things like that. So very, very important to make sure that you constantly keep an eye on it. And not have a defined strategy. It's one of the things when we're actually sitting down to do a campaign is, we work very closely with our teams to determine, well, what's the strategy? Are we using programmatic? Are we using search? Are we going to use social? What's the experience we want that customer to have? Are they going to get an email at a certain point? When do they see the banner? We map out these really, what we call touch point strategies that show all the different areas where we touch that customer on that journey. Because in Cisco's case, it's not that they come to the website one time and they're going to buy something. The buying journey usually takes 12 to 16 months, and they can visit our site up to 50 times before they actually make a decision. So very important for us, being in B2B, that we have to think about that this journey can take a lot of time. And, it's not going to be, it's a multi-touch attribution where search is going to probably have an infant. They could come directly in. They could go onto social. They can go to other sites to look and get information. So it's a very long process. So why strategy has to be very important to make sure that we at the end of the day, we give them what they need in that moment that they're doing their research or if they're making their final buying decision. And assuming the customer journeys are linear. It's kind of like what I was just saying. A customer is not just going to go click on a banner, go to your site, and necessarily that's it. They could go all over the place. Customers are now self-directed in their journeys when they're trying to make a purchase. I mean, we know we are too, right? Even if we're buying something, we might do some research on different websites till we actually go to the website and actually make a purchase. We're going to, talk to our friends. We're going to use social media to say, hey, what do you think about this? There's so many influencers. And just to make an assumption that a customer is just going to go one way and maybe might even go backwards at some point, right? They might decide, well, we're going to kind of rethink this a little bit. Don't ever assume that it's linear, but create a journey that allows them to have the drive and control. And then using the same tactics for all audience. That's one thing that we really found very enlightening with us, because when we first started programmatic, a lot of times we would do kind of the same tactics for everybody, realizing our audiences are different. And sometimes even within programmatic, we discovered that sometimes, we might find that retargeting wasn't a great one for this audience, that this audience spent more time in a research phase. So it was more important to kind of nurture them. And maybe there was certain kinds of content that they were more interested in. So we had to create very, very tailored, specific, tactics based on that audience's preferences. Then not reviewing creative performance frequently. I think that tends to be a challenge for a lot of companies is you write good creative and you put it out there, but you have to constantly be monitoring it, see how it's working, and keep it fresh. You don't want to be every time you're going out to a site and you see that same banner over and over again. That really gets old. We try to do a lot of things on a quarterly basis because, again, being a big company, we can't always be writing content every week. But we also, during a quarter, try to have like what we call refreshes of content. So making sure that, at least 2 or 3 times we go out there, put something new. Just try some different things as well, trying to get creative, but also keeping up with industry events and trends, because again, you want to make sure that, your customer knows that, hey, yeah, they're keeping up with this. And, it's like, oh, I'm not seeing the same banner that I saw, 3 months ago. And with that being said, I will close my presentation and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Diane, for the wonderful speech. And is there any questions? Ms. Terry, I guess. Ms. Terry, are you there?
I don't see anything in the chat. I've been monitoring.